Look at Surah Al-Fatiha.
Surah Al-Fatiha.
Fatiha, the opening chapter of the Quran. We're reciting 17 times on a minimum.
17 times at least a day you recite Surah Al-Fatiha.
In Islam, whipping out your prayer rug and praying in your native language would be a complete waste of your time. If you want your prayers to make it, then you have to start learning classical Arabic and you have to master the first chapter of the Quran, which is called Al-Fatiha chapter. Now, the Islamic Salah or prayer involves repeating words and sentences in Arabic that one may or may not understand. The Salah must begin with these two words, Allahu Akbar, which means Allah is great. You can't simply swap words here and say Allah is lovely, Allah is wonderful, or even translate it and say God is great. No, it has to be Allahu Akbar. You have to repeat all these words here word for word. You have to stick to the script. You have to ask Allah for forgiveness 3 times by saying forget it. Also, one crucial component of the Muslim prayer, which has to do with learning Arabic, is the opening chapter of the Quran, Al-Fatiha chapter, and you must recite it in classical Arabic word for word. In the hadith, it says,
If you pray and you do not recite Al-Fatiha in each salah, then your salah is invalid.
Thanks, boss. So you pray to Allah, you have to read the Quran back to Him. Allah will not tolerate any mistakes when you recite the Fatiha. If you make a mistake or mispronounce a word, your prayer is invalid. You have to make sure the Fatiha is grammatically correct, or else Allah won't be satisfied.
Made such a mistake that changes the meaning of the Fatiha, your prayer is invalid.
You have to recite this script throughout the day from verse 1 to verse 7 without any mistakes. Now, the last part of the Fatiha chapter is where things get interesting. Most people don't know the meaning of guide us to the straight path, the path of those you have blessed, not of those against whom there is anger, nor of those who are misguided. These are 2 groups of people mentioned here at the bottom of verse 7. Some people think these are folks who reject God, or these are people who twist the truth and reject it. But these are 2 very specific groups of people, and they are the Jews and the Christians.
This is the Yahud. We don't follow the Yahud because they are the ones who earn the ghadab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَالضَّالِينَ, the misguided. Who are they? The Nasara, the Christians. We don't follow their path. We don't follow their ways because they are the ones that went misguided.
So the misguided and those who make Allah angry. Jews and Christians are not part of these 2 specific groups. They don't simply belong here. No, they embody the 2 groups. So just to rephrase the last 2 verses, just to make them sound less complicated, O Allah, guide us not to be like the Jews and the Christians. Here's what you have. Essentially, when Muslims pray 5 times a day, they have to recite Al-Fatiha 17 times throughout the day. 2 times before sunrise, 4 times before midday, and so on. All day long, none of those against whom there is anger, nor of those who are misguided, which is, I don't want to be like the Christians or the Jews. And yet, Muslims from all over the world flock to Christian majority nations in search of a better life. They choose the US, they immigrate to Australia or Norway, they immigrate to the West, they don't immigrate to Pakistan or Egypt or Somalia. In Islam, music is haram, it's not allowed. No Christmas or even wishing someone Merry Christmas or a Happy New Year. Can't even have a dog as a pet. And I will remind myself every day that Christians are the kuffar, the infidels in my daily prayers, but I want to immigrate to their countries. The hypocrisy is astounding. All day long, oh Allah, I don't want to be like the Christians and the Jews. And then when Muslim scholars and Muslim leaders get sick, it's time to go to the West or Israel to get help, to get medical treatment. Now, the Fatiha chapter is the first chapter of the Quran. It's not tucked in somewhere in the middle of the Quran or towards the end. Here's the Quran right here. Turn to page 1. Right at the outset, Christians and Jews. Usually you open a book, any book, and you read the first chapter and it sets the tone for the entire book. You learn about the main character, you learn about the antagonist, you get a glimpse of what the book is all about. But look at how Muhammad starts his book, name-calling Jews and Christians. And the name-calling doesn't stop here, of course, it gets worse. The Jews have earned the wrath of Allah. They are apes and pigs. Jews and Christians are the worst of Allah's creation and will be burned up in hell? In the hadith, Muhammad said, there will be a time when the rocks will say, "O Muslim, there's a Jew hiding behind me. Go get him." Now, this Fatiha chapter and the Salah raise so many pressing questions. Number one, how do you think Jews are perceived by Muslims when they are referred to as the people who make Allah angry day and night? Does that promote any sort of positive behavior towards them?
Of course, some of them ended up in Europe next to Mr. Hitler. And you know what happened?
Number two, the Fatiha must be recited 17 times throughout the day. That's over 6,000 times a year. In the name of honesty and transparency, how many Muslims actually meet this divine standard of repeating the Fatiha that many times per year? How many fall short? And finally, number three, God wants people to learn classical Arabic, which happens to be one of the most difficult languages to learn, and also memorize the script in classical Arabic. Otherwise, their prayers won't make it?